Daddy. Long legs. So many misconceptions and such little time. I mean, these spindly-legged sweethearts have endured decades of myths and misinformation. So let's change that. Welcome to the Insect Spotlight Project, a channel dedicated to shining a light on insects, spiders, and any other creepy crawlies that get left out of the ecologic spotlight. Today, we are talking about the order Opiliones, better known as the Harvestmen or the daddy longlegs. Let's just get this out of the way early. Harvestmen are not spiders. Spiders are the order Araneae, and the Harvestmen are the order Opiliones. However, they are both arachnids, class Arachnida, so they're related. Alright, I can die peacefully now. Let's continue. Most of you have probably come across a Harvestman at some point. They are widely distributed across all continents except Antarctica, have conquered a wide variety of terrestrial ecosystems, and have over 6,500 different species. Now, that may look small compared to the spiders, which have over 50,000 described species, but they're an outlier. 6,500 is quite diverse for a single order of arachnid. This is not the only reason they should be revered either. Opiliones is believed to be around 400 million years old, making them one of the oldest known terrestrial animals. Their exact placement in the Arachnida is still being debated. Some studies point toward their sister group being Ricynulii. Other molecular studies point towards scorpions. Mites and sun spiders seem to be somewhere in there. But at this point, arachnids might not even be a monophyletic or true grouping. Monophyletic meaning derived from one unique common ancestor. So long story short is it's messy. Remember, you can always check the video description for some additional resources if you want to embrace the messy. Anyway, despite this messy history, there are a few traits we can use to identify the Opiliones and separate them out from any other arachnid lookalikes. But first off, like other arachnids, Harvestmen have 8 legs and 2 tagmata, or body regions. The cephalothorax and the abdomen, also referred to as the prosoma and opisthosoma respectively. This will immediately distinguish them from the insects, which have 6 legs and 3 tagmata. However, in the Harvestmen, these 2 body regions are broadly fused, making it appear that they only have a single round tagma, and this can immediately help distinguish them from the Araneae, the spiders. Another conspicuous trait of the Opiliones is their eyes. Their eyes are grouped close together toward the middle of their cephalothorax. This overall structure is called their ocularium. They also usually have very long, spindly legs, leading many to lovingly call them daddy longlegs. Long legs is not enough to go off of, though, as many groups of spiders will also have long legs and thus get mistaken for the true daddies. But note the 2 distinct tagmata on, say, this cellar spider. But one group of Harvestmen throws all of this for a loop, and that's the suborder Sci-hub, the mite Harvestmen. They are called this because they look like mites, and nobody would judge you for mistaking them as such. They don't have eyes, they live close to the soil, they don't have particularly long legs. What they do have is ozophores. Ozophores are little knob-like structures on the sides of these Harvestmen that release defensive chemicals when threatened. This is one of the best ways to distinguish them from the Acari, the mites. Godspeed. Now that we're all on the same page on how to identify the Opiliones, let's talk about their life cycle and ecology. As you would generally expect from an arachnid, Opiliones don't have any sort of radical metamorphosis. Instead, they just go from egg to juvenile to adult, with the juveniles looking like smaller versions of the adults. Now, Opiliones are actually pretty great mothers for an arthropod. Most of them are pretty choosy about where to lay their eggs, targeting moist crevices and bark and soil and foliage, but this is only the beginning. There are Harvestmen that will bury their eggs after laying or seal them up in empty snail shells. Others will coat them in mucus to help maintain moisture, or coat them in defensive chemicals that are foul-smelling to deter predators and pathogens, though this also may be a strategy to alert other females that this spot is taken, so lay your eggs somewhere else. Some of the more hardcore Harvestmen will even stand guard over their eggs to protect them from predators. These Opiliones are what we call subsocial. They're certainly not as social as some other critters, but this limited parental care is still out of character for most arthropods and worth noting. Certain taxa will stay with their young even after hatching, with some species remaining with their kiddos up to 2 weeks post-hatch. Now, once these juveniles hatch out and scatter, they need to get some food in their system if they want to grow up big and strong like mom. As for what they eat, that can vary. They're mostly predators. They like to eat soft creeping things like springtails, isopods, tiny insects, worms, slugs, or even other harvestmen if the opportunity presents itself. But notice how I said they are mostly predators. Opiliones are also very successful scavengers, and omnivorous ones at that, feeding on things like rotting vegetation, dead arthropods, bird droppings. There's even a record in the literature of one feeding on pollen, weirdly enough. The general takeaway is that they're very generalist. Their main predation strategy is to sit and wait. They use their long legs to detect vibrations of nearby prey, using mainly mechanical rather than visual stimulus. I mean, most of them hunt at night, anyway. Once they get a hold of their prey, they don't inject venom and suck it up like spiders. Harvestmen actually consume solid food, so they break apart small pieces of their prey, consuming a mix of solid and liquid particles. Their mouth parts are a bit more complex to reflect this. Claw-like chelicerae grab good bits and pass it back to the rest of the feeding apparatus, which we call the stomatheca, a preoral chamber that helps to shuffle food to the mouth. And the front of the harvestman seems to be where all the action is, because in addition to feeding, this is where the magic happens. By magic, I mean making babies. Harvestmen mate face-to-face, and they mate directly, so the male parts deliver the sperm directly to the female parts. The male reproductive organ, or adyagus, extends out in front of them, and after a brief assessment of one another, is inserted into the female's genital opening, or gonopore. The adyagus of some males will also produce a nutritious secretion for the females to feed on, acting as a nuptial gift and providing some much-needed nutrients for egg development. Male Opiliones are known to guard females after mating to ensure that no other males try their luck. Some groups will go so far as creating mating plugs to seal the gonopore from any future mating attempts. Though despite all this, some females will just reproduce asexually through parthenogenesis, the creation of viable offspring from unfertilized eggs. But either way, the cycle continues. Unless they get gobbled up before then, a very real possibility. Birds, insects, and spiders all pose a legitimate threat. Luckily, they have a pretty large arsenal of defenses. Some of these strategies are obvious, such as large spined pedipalps, but others are more cryptic, such as the foul chemicals released by many groups when disturbed. One of their more unique defense strategies is autotomy, the shedding of an appendage to create time for an escape. Opiliones will regularly detach their legs if grabbed, and those legs will continue to twitch in a scything motion to further confuse predators. They can also be found grouping together, which can provide safety in numbers, but often this is a way to keep themselves warm and humid in tougher climates. Opiliones also have a lot of parasites to worry about, one of the additional downsides of eating a more solid diet. So to balance this out, they've been found to produce a variety of antibiotics. And even if they survive all this, they might just pick up some parasitic mites along the way. Now, harvestmen have enough to worry about, so we shouldn't be another hurdle they need to overcome. Opiliones don't really have any negative impacts on us. You'll hear the playground myth that they're actually super venomous, but their fangs just can't break our skin. But this is completely unfounded. Harvestmen don't even have venom glands, and they're not going to bite you or sting you. They do, however, provide some pretty useful services. For one, their scavenging habits help them recycle nutrients from things like bird droppings, but they also can be found feeding on garden pests, such as aphids and slugs. Now, you might think that their name Harvestmen comes from these benefits that they provide to agriculture, but it's much more complicated than that. Harvestmen as a name kind of came before Opiliones. They were called harvest spiders or shepherd spiders back in the 1600s, and Opiliones was coined in the 1800s referencing this name, Opilio meaning shepherd. In a lot of European languages, their common names reference scything or reaping. For example, in Russian, they are called synokosets, meaning haymakers, or kosinoska, meaning little scythe leg. As we mentioned, harvestmen will often detach their legs as a defense mechanism, and when detached, they'll make a scything motion, possibly leading to both their common and scientific names. Another thought is that Opiliones references the stilts that shepherds would use to observe their flocks, giving them a long-legged appearance. But also, harvestmen are really common around late summer, early fall in harvest time, and supposedly the Theater of Insects by Moffat in 1634 mentions that they're abundant in good sheep pasture. But I couldn't find a copy of this text because it's from 1634 and in Latin, unless I went... Yeah, it's like probably one or multiple of those things. Let's go back to something a bit more in my wheelhouse, like how do you make sure the harvestmen on your property are happy and having a grand old time? Harvestmen need prey, so native plants are a must to bring in the insect herbivores, but they also need habitat complexity. They need moist crevices to lay their eggs and shade to hide away in. They need the ability to move around to different microclimates depending on their current needs. Coarsewoody debris, stones, low-growing sprawling plants, all of these can help to create diverse microhabitats that the harvestmen can freely move between. And lastly, please tell your child that pulling their legs off is not cool. I don't know if that's still a thing the kiddos do, but when I was growing up, I had to stop many peers from dismembering these poor harvestmen. Anyways, thank y'all for listening. And if you like the content, please remember to like and subscribe to keep up to date with future videos. And if you have any favorite groups of Opiliones or any fun facts I missed, please leave them in the comments below. I always love to hear about it. Peace, y'all.